Hi folks, welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim. Thanks for joining me. It's Christmas Eve day in 2024. We actually got a little bit of snow overnight, so it looks like it's going to be a white Christmas here in Pennsylvania, which is always a treat. It's nice to see the snow. We don't see the snow so much anymore because of global warming, so I'll take it. I wanted to do a few things for this video. First of all is a mini book haul, some books I got from Goodwill. Then we'll turn on to a new acquisition. I got The Great Conversation from the Great Books of the Western World, Volume Edition 2. And I want to do a walkthrough of that. And then I want to talk about this 10-year reading plan that I'm going to launch into in 2025, which I hope doesn't take 10 years, but we'll more on that later. But it's basically, I have to decide what the plan is going forward because there are different 10-year reading plans that Britannica issued. So we're going to sort through that a little bit and we'll make sense of it. But let's start first with some new finds, this new mini haul from local Goodwill store. And we'll start with Booker T. Washington, Up From Slavery. This is a book that I've read only selected chapters from. I had the pleasure of teaching it the last time I taught an American Lit survey course. And I was impressed by it. And it makes a really nice counterpoint to the work of W.E.B. Du Bois. These two gentlemen were at odds about what the political program should be going forward after slavery, like sort of in the Reconstruction period and thereafter, like what's the best path forward for African Americans. And Booker T. Washington tells his story in this book. I'm sure it's his most famous book. So that is nice to find in a little Signet Classic edition. It's a clean copy, a little bit of markings here on the edge, but looks like it probably hasn't been read. So that was cool. Also, a new edition of Homer, the Iliad, a new prose translation. And this is translated with an introduction by Martin Hammond. So this is just added to my collection of Iliads. I have the Great Books of the Western World Iliad, which is a prose translation. I can't remember if there are two different translations in the different editions. I think there are. And so one of those is by Samuel Butler, I believe. I have the Alexander Pope translation, the famous translation of the Iliad in a Heritage Press edition. I have the earlier prose translation of the Iliad, I think this was one of the first, maybe it was the Odyssey that came out first, like the first Penguin Classic. I'll have to do a video about that, like the first and second series of the Penguin Classics. This is a new one that I think came out in the 80s or 90s, prose. So it's going to read more like a novel. I also have the Robert Fagles translation in poetry, which is probably my personal favorite. But it's always nice to have a different take on Homer. This was a nice find. Ernest J. Gaines, A Lesson Before Dying. So last year I read his book, A Gathering of Old Men, which I think was a little free library find, and I returned it to the little free library. This is another one of his more famous books, and I'm really looking forward to reading it because it's not long at all. Should be a quick read. I hope to get to this maybe in the winter time in 2025. It's a Vintage Contemporaries paperback. So yeah. A Lesson Before Dying is set in a small Cajun community in the late 1940s. Jefferson, a young black man, is an unwitting party to a liquor store shootout in which 3 men are killed. The only survivor. He is convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Grant Wiggins, who left his hometown for the university, has returned to the plantation school to teach. As he struggles with his decision whether to stay or escape to another state, his aunt and Jefferson's godmother persuade him to visit Jefferson in his cell and impart his learning and his pride to Jefferson before his death. In the end, the two men forge a bond as they both come to understand this simple heroism of resisting and defying the expected. Yeah, nice find, very clean, really in brand new condition. Found it at Goodwill. This, I couldn't resist. John Irving, the Imaginary Girlfriend. This is memoir, and also includes some photos, a lot of photos of John Irving and wrestling. That's his son, one of his sons, and I think that's the other son. And anyway, that was his wife. I don't know if he's still married to her or not. But anyway, this looks very short, very readable. I grabbed it right away because I didn't have this. I have pretty much everything John Irving wrote, but maybe not every last volume, but close. This adds to that. But then I discovered in reading this that this is actually pulled out of another book called Piggy Sneed, something Piggy Sneed, and which I think I have that in hardcover. But anyway, as a Goodwill find, this was good, and I'll breeze through it. This is just like the memoir portion of that book. I think that book might be an assembly of stories and essays and memoir. I'm not sure. I haven't read that one, but yeah, it's trying to save Piggy Sneed. That's, I think, the official title. You can tell I don't have my reading glasses on, so it's a bit of a struggle. I could just stop the video, and I might have to, but anyway, yeah, I started reading this, and it's great. I'm also reading John Irving's The Cider House Rules right now. I'm really liking that so far. So yeah, nice find. And then this grabbed my attention too. Bruce Sterling, Visionary in Residence Stories. So this apparently is 13 new stories from the leather-jacketed high druid of cyberpunk. And some of these pieces look very short, and then some are longer stories. And it looks like he's got little descriptions of, you know, where these were published or what he was thinking about that. I think so. I haven't really looked at it too closely, but it is divided into sections. So you've got a section on science fiction, fiction about science, fiction for scientists, architecture fiction, design fiction, mainstream fiction, cyberpunk to ribofunk, and the past is a future that already happened. So I'll try this out. We'll see. I've not read any Bruce Sterling before, but the name is familiar to me. I also plan to read New Romancer by William Gibson, which is like that cyberpunk classic. I'll get around to that hopefully in 2025. But yeah, we'll see what this is all about. Couldn't resist it. And that takes care of my mini haul from Goodwill that we went to last weekend. Now, moving on to the Great Conversation. So in one of my recent videos, I was talking about my plans for 2025 and how I want to launch into some more like teaching themed, if you want to call them that, or maybe call them deep dives, discussion prompt based videos where we look at selections from the great books and dig into them. So I want to take my cue from the Great Books of the Western World, Britannica reading lists. And this is actually a pretty complicated thing because you've got the reading list that was presented in the 1952 edition of the Great Conversation, a 10-year reading plan, which gives you a sampling of all the great books in the set. Then you've got the reading list that's in this book, An Introduction to the Great Books and to a Liberal Education, which also introduces you to the great books. It's basically like 15 readings, and then it gives you discussion questions and like some background around those. So this sort of compares to year one in the 1952 Great Books list. And then there are other volumes here that cover different disciplines. So, you know, like I think there's a couple volumes on literature, and then philosophy and religion and history and on and on and on, science and math. So there's that to sort of compare to the list in here. And then one of my viewers mentioned, what about the Gateway to the Great Books? Well, these are these volumes that were targeted at younger readers, and they would have to be very precocious younger readers. But I think they're fine for adults, myself included. But what they have here is not only a syntopical guide that kind of gives you like related readings for different authors in a set, but then they also have reading lists, but they're suggested readings for different grade levels. So they start with 7th and 8th grade, and they take you volume by volume through, and they give you suggested readings from each volume. And then as you elevate in the grades, the readings get longer and harder. So that would be another way in. But what I noticed with this is it's not really a reading plan per se. It's just more a list of suggested readings. So you'd have to devise your own reading plan. But if you wanted to sort of start at a simpler level, more fundamental level, and like graduate up, this might be a way to go. But all the readings here are in this set. So that gives you some options too. But then the same viewer mentioned that in the 1990 second edition of the Great Books of the Western World, this Great Conversation volume includes its own 10-year reading plan, which is different from the 1952 because there are different readings in the second edition set. So I thought, okay, this just decides it for me. I have to get this. So I went on, I guess it was Amazon I got this, and I found it used at a really good price. It was declared in acceptable condition. This is better than acceptable condition, and I want to do a walkthrough of it with you. And I'll also talk about the reading plan at the end and how it compares to the original 10-year reading plan. So there's a lot to sort through here, but let's jump right to a walkthrough of this. This, by the way, completes my 1990 set of the Great Books of the Western World. I have videos on this already where I go through that and talk about it, but this was the one volume that I didn't get. And I'm glad I got it because there are some, it's different. It's different than what you get here. In a lot different, more different than I thought it would be, not just the format of it, but actually the content. So let's dig into the contents. Let's do a walkthrough. Okay, here's what the 1990 Great Conversation looks like. It is hardcover. It's in a dust jacket, and it's like a coffee table sized book. And I rather like that because it's saying to the reader, this is more of an intro to the great book set that you just bought, if you got the 1990 edition. And it's fun to browse through. It's like kind of gets you in the mood to read these texts. It's heavily illustrated. All right, our editor-in-chief is Mortimer Adler. Associate editors Clifton Fademan, Philip Getz, and members of the advisory board were Douglas Allenbrook, Jacques Barzan, Norman Cousins, John Kenneth Galbraith, Heinz Pagels, and Anthony Quinton. By this point, Robert Maynard Hutchins had passed away. Okay, and published by Britannica. 1990, and third printing in 1992. Okay, here are the committee of consultants. It's sort of interesting. I noticed a few familiar names on here. Isaac Asimov, Daniel Bell, Thornton Bradshaw, William F. Buckley Jr., David Carlson, Maurice Cranston, Hugh Downs, the television host, Stephen Jay Gould, writer and professor of biology, Reverend Theodore Hesburgh, Dame Leonie Judith Kramer, Alexander Kwapong, Martin Marty, Bill Moyers, Hajime Nakamura, Octavio Paz, and Michael Saris. Here's your contents. So you've got, gives you like a table of contents for the whole set, chronology, great authors, the Great Conversation Revisited, contributions of the 20th century. So a lot of the changes in this 1990 set were new additions to the 20th century. You have excerpts from the Great Conversation, which means you don't get the entire essay that you get here. So if you want to read Hutchins's entire essay, you're going to have to get an earlier copy. And it's a long essay. And then you have suggestions to readers of the great books. It gives you ideas for how to read it. Author-to-author index, author-to-idea index, and then here's your 10 years of reading in the great books, and then your presentation on the great ideas. So a lot to chew on here. So here you have the contents, which is sort of visually represented for you. I like graphs like this, like these historical timelines. So you're seeing where authors line up in history. So starting with ancient Greece and Rome, and you have not only like the lifespans of the authors, but also like other things that were happening at the time. Then you go through the Middle Ages. You can see a lot of the books represented here, 15, 16, 1700s. Then your 19th and 20th centuries, they're very well represented as well. That's nice. Here's an essay called The Great Conversation Revisited. I haven't read this yet, but I plan to read it soon. This is by Adler. Here we have another essay by Clifton Fadiman on the contributions of the 20th century. Just focused on that. So again, giving you an introduction to these authors that they included. Here's where you get the excerpts from the original essay, The Great Conversation, that I have a whole series of videos on this. It's a healthy sampling from that. And I haven't compared it to the original, but you're getting like a fair share of that essay. Here's some suggested approaches to the great books. And this is interesting, this author-to-author index. What is this? Okay, it's a more personal, or no, I'm sorry, it's the heart of the Great Conversation, demonstrating how the authors use, expand on, or refute the ideas of their predecessors. So if you want to know like who an individual author is responding to or in dialogue with or in some way influenced by, this gives you a good sense of that. This was not in the original 1952 set. It's an interesting way to cross-cut by author. And then you have an author to idea index. So, there's this list of what are they, 102 great ideas in this set. So this is showing you for each individual author, here are the great ideas that author touches upon. Gives you another way to dig into it. But what I'm most interested in sharing with you is this. The 10 years of reading. And how does this compare to what we get? Well, let's just take the first year and compare. I have my original Great Conversation with the 10-year, the first of the 10-year plans. Okay, so let's set it up this way. Hopefully you can see that. So first year, we read Apology and Crito by Plato. That's the same. Then we read Aristophanes, The Clouds, and Lysistrata. That's the same. Plato Republic, books 1 and 2, the same. Aristotle's Ethics, book 1, no change. Aristotle Politics, book 1, no change. Plutarch's Lives of Lycurgus, Numa Pompilius, Alexander and Caesar, that's the same. Read the Gospel according to St. Matthew and the Acts of the Apostles, no different. The Confessions, books 1 through 8 of St. Augustine. Machiavelli's The Prince. Gargantua and Pantagruel, books 1 and 2. No change here at all so far. Montaigne Essays, I don't think there's any changes here. That's the same. Then you read Hamlet. You read John Locke, Concerning Civil Government, the second essay. You read Rousseau, Social Contract, books 1 and 2. No change. Gibbon, Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, chapters 15 and 16. Then the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and some Federalist Papers. No changes that I can see. Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, book 1, chapter 9. No change. Then we do get some changes here. Basically, these are additions. So de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, Volume 1, Part 2, Chapter 6 and 8. That wasn't in the original set, so they've added that to the first year plan. Marx and Engels, Communist Manifesto is the same. And that's where this list ends. But we add 2 more readings to our first year program. The Master Builder, a play by Heinrich Ibsen, and Schrödinger, What is Life? So you can see, basically they're preserving the first year plan, but they're adding, I think they added 3 new readings. So instead of 18, you have 21 readings. In the second year, (21 readings in the new edition and 18 readings in the original. So they're adding Nietzsche and Whitehead. Also Voltaire's Candide is added. But it looks like the older stuff is pretty much the same. I'll go through this more carefully, but that gives you an idea of how this list looks different. Okay, now that we've looked at that, I think we're ready to make some decisions about the path forward for 2025. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that walkthrough through this great conversation, a book. I'm really happy to have that in the collection now, and I'm eager to spend some more time with it and go through the charts and graphs and the tables and figure out where I want to head with this reading plan of videos. Here's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to key off of this primarily. I like the fact that they're including some of the more modern authors. It's more readings, but they're just building, I think, on what appeared in this original. I will compare. Now, the other question is what to do about the list in this book, which starts very similar to the 1952 list. And I'm just going to basically freelance this. I'm going to decide whether I want to cover any of the additional material in here. And like, we'll see. Like, I will see what makes sense. So for instance, they have Gulliver's Travels in this list, but in the first year, yeah, Gulliver's Travels is not in the year one list. So, you know, I might make some additions to these lists, but I'm probably going to mainly key off of the 10-year reading plan in this volume now that I have it, and it'll be fun. Now, my plans for this, I don't know, this could just flame out, you know, like life happens, things happen, you know, I might lose interest, you might lose interest. It's not the only kind of video I want to make on the channel for sure, but I do want to dabble in this, and maybe we'll pick up a head of steam with it. These 10-year reading plans are intriguing to me because in most cases, you're not reading a complete book. You're reading selected chapters, so the length of each reading is pretty manageable. And I think for that reason, it's not as daunting to me. And a lot of these books I've already been through before, so, you know, like the second, third time through, it'll be fun to revisit them. And it'll be fun to do some deep dives with them. So we'll see what happens with that. But I also not going to stick to like all the, basically it's a 10-year plan, yes. But my hope is it doesn't take 10 years for me to do all the videos. I might start issuing them, these readings, pretty frequently, and just kind of have them out there on YouTube for people to discover, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to watch. I might go slower than the 10-year reading plan. It just depends on my schedule and how much energy I have, and my interest level, and so forth. So, you know, the videos will vary in length. I'll probably have a lot more to say about some readings than other readings, but I want to pay some attention to this and encourage people to get involved in reading these books. I'll also do my best to provide links to ebooks, public domain available things on places like archive.org and elsewhere. So if you want to read any of these texts and you don't own physical copies, or you're not interested in owning a Great Books of the Western World set, you don't have to be left behind. And there's, you know, a lot of these editions are available from other publishers too. You can just pick and choose the ones you want to read. But that is the plan. Now, as far as the gateway to the great books, I think this is an outlier for me. This could probably be a separate project. So I'm thinking of maybe doing, and I want to read more of this set because I haven't read a ton of these volumes yet. And the reading lengths look pretty manageable in here. And it would be fun to go through their graduated reading program here. I think that's basically, I'm going to reserve that for a completely different set of videos. It would be a different playlist. But stay tuned for that. Like, if the spirit moves me, I might start. What would be the first reading if I did this? Let's take a look. All right. And also, I might hop around between volumes. So this is like a 10-volume set, I think. So they have the first reading in Gateway to the Great Books would be Robinson Crusoe. I don't know if that's the whole book, but Robinson Crusoe for volume 2. And then you jump to volume 3. Stephen Crane, The Open Boat is the first one that appears. Volume 4, Moliere, The Doctor in Spite of Himself. Volume 5, Hazlitt, something by Hazlitt. Volume 6, Crevecoeur, The Making of Americans. Volume 7, David Hume on the Study of History. Volume 8, can't even make out that name, but you get the idea. So it's kind of like this really needs to be its own series of videos. Odds are I won't get around to this right away because I'm too busy doing other stuff. But you never know. I mean, Robinson Crusoe would be fun to cover because that was one of the first big books I read, and I would love to revisit it too. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope everyone has a very, very happy holiday. I wish peace and joy and happiness to all for this season and the new year. Thanks, folks.